Will you never bring your children back to Britain? I suppose it's far too early to determine and premature to conclude. So yes, for now, it remains impossible for me to return my family to Britain. Nobody anticipated his resurgence. Yet merely days following his ultimate legal setback, Prince Harry unexpectedly emerged, not in a courtroom, not at a ceremonial function, but within a confidential exclusive broadcast recorded at a concealed international venue. And his declarations left everyone astounded. Initially, he launched an assault on the royal household, charging them with treachery, desertion, and silent participation in his destruction. Then tears fell. And then arrived the words nobody was prepared to hear. I have nowhere remaining to turn. For the inaugural time, Harry wasn't seeking funds, he wasn't demanding fairness, he wasn't threatening revelations. He was pleading for sanctuary. This wasn't a resurgence, this wasn't a rebranding, this wasn't vengeance. This was a broken prince publicly disintegrating, condemning the establishment in one moment, then imploring for its shelter in the next. Do you permit someone re-entry after they've demolished everything? I am no longer attempting to flee my history, Harry declared. I am attempting to mend what I shattered. Princess Anne this morning, 14th January, from the Balmoral residence. You may deceive journalists, you may deceive citizens, but you cannot deceive the crown, not eternally. Those were the concluding words within an uncommon public declaration released by Princess Anne. As the Globe processed Prince Harry's emotional resurgence in Geneva the previous day, Anne extended no compassion. Instead, she referenced the fable of the shepherd child who raised false alarms, comparing her nephew's most recent reconciliation efforts to the final, disregarded warnings of a figure who had depleted all remaining tolerance. We all recognized the warning signals, Anne declared, repeatedly, and when no threats materialized, we ceased responding. I suspect this latest appeal arrives too late, even if it's authentic. The gravity of that declaration weighed heavily across the nation. It represented not merely a personal rejection, it was an institutional one. And for Prince Harry, whose arrival in the UK earlier this month had carried subtle expectations of clemency, it signaled a ruthless public severing of his final remaining connections to the House of Windsor. The broadcast, transmitted simultaneously across numerous international platforms, marked the inaugural occasion Harry had directly acknowledged his marriage's dissolution and publicly voiced willingness to pursue formal separation. More remarkable, however, was his explicit apology not to citizens, but to the royal household itself. To my father, King Charles, to my brother William, and to Catherine, he declared, pausing purposefully between each name, I was mistaken. I permitted rage, anxiety, and bewilderment to direct decisions that destroyed not merely relationships but confidence. I accept accountability for that. He characterized his present personal situation as emotionally isolating and structurally precarious, referencing continuing legal conflicts, financial pressure, and the psychological burden of extended confrontation. For the inaugural time, he conceded that remaining in California had become unsustainable. I experience no tranquility, Harry declared. I experience no foundation, and most critically, I feel I am not providing my children the steadiness they require. He verified that he is actively investigating legal and practical routes to relocate to the United Kingdom, even under highly limited and non-visible circumstances. The central obstacle he acknowledged was custody. Returning my children to Britain even briefly is not something I anticipate happening smoothly, Harry declared. Legal, emotional, and personal obstacles exist, but I am prepared to be patient, I am prepared to put in effort, and I am prepared to proceed without presumption. When questioned whether he anticipated royal security, financial assistance, or institutional restoration, Harry responded with categorical denial. I am not requesting reinstatement, he declared. I am requesting the opportunity to exist responsibly, quietly, and in a manner that shields my children from additional damage. Within hours of the broadcast's distribution, Buckingham Palace verified that King Charles had been notified of the transmission before its airing, but had chosen not to comment publicly. Palace representatives characterized the monarch's stance as cautious but observant, indicating that any reaction would transpire through official pathways, not media declarations. The most immediate observable response originated not from the sovereign, but from Kensington Palace. On January 25th, under 24 hours following the broadcast, Prince William and Princess Catherine quietly departed London on a prearranged engagement in northern Scotland, where they were captured visiting youth development initiatives near Inverness and meeting with military households in Aberdeenshire. While palace representatives described the visit as long-scheduled, the timing attracted instant examination. Royal correspondents observed that the Wales's departure aligned precisely with the window during which Harry had privately sought a face-to-face discussion. According to numerous sources acquainted with the exchanges, Harry's legal counsel transmitted a formal petition to Kensington Palace roughly 10 days prior, suggesting a private encounter with William and Catherine, either at Windsor or in London, removed from media visibility. The petition reportedly cited Harry's desire to pursue restoration as siblings and to address future arrangements regarding his children. No response was provided. Instead, the Waleses boarded a royal aircraft and vacated the capital. This was not evasion, stated one senior palace representative. Princess Anne's response materialized shortly after, with considerably greater directness. In a public declaration released from Balmoral Estate, where she was participating in a youth equestrian initiative, Anne invoked the parable of the shepherd child who raised false alarms, a metaphor broadly understood as a direct allusion to Harry's repeated public complaints and appeals. "You may mislead journalists, you may mislead the population," Anne declared, "but the Crown is not misled, not indefinitely." She continued, "When alarm bells sound repeatedly without outcome, people eventually stop responding. Even if someday the danger is authentic, it may come too late to be accepted." The declaration was concise, but its implications were institutional rather than emotional. Palace representatives later explained that Anne's words reflected not personal reaction, but long-standing policy frameworks regarding credibility, behavior, and institutional accountability. Within Westminster circles, the response was instantaneous. "This is not a household disagreement," stated one senior constitutional advisor. "This is a proclamation of institutional finality." Behind closed doors, however, sources verified that Princess Anne had previously directed her legal counsel to investigate limited non-public channels that might permit Harry supervised contact with his children within Crown property, should he return to the United Kingdom under carefully managed circumstances. These arrangements, representatives emphasized, would not represent reinstatement, restoration, or public rapprochement. "They are humanitarian, not institutional," stated one courtier. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle maintained public silence. Her representatives delivered no response to Harry's broadcast. She appeared in no associated legal documents, nor was she photographed attending any functions in the days immediately following his declaration. However, sources verify that she remained in California and continued to retain complete physical custody of both children under existing court arrangements. Privately, representatives familiar with the Sussex household characterized the circumstances as legally suspended and emotionally volatile. "The marriage is functionally concluded," stated one source. "The custody matter remains unresolved, and the institutional gateway as of now remains sealed." Harry concluded his broadcast with a statement that, to numerous observers, framed the entire episode not as an appeal for clemency, but as recognition of consequence. "I departed from duty believing I was selecting liberty," he stated. "I now comprehend that liberty without responsibility is merely another form of imprisonment. I cannot reverse what I did, but I can determine what I do next." What he did next, however, would not be determined by him alone. The days following Prince Harry's Geneva broadcast were defined not by restoration, but by procedural quietness, a quietness that within royal structures carries equivalent significance as any official pronouncement. On January 26th, legal proceedings resumed in London concerning Harry's litigation against Associated Newspapers Limited, publisher of the Daily Mail. Although Harry had previously obtained a partial legal triumph against Mirror Group newspapers, this case offered different terrain, one governed not by emotional vindication, but by evidentiary persistence and limitation periods. Harry did not attend the hearing physically. Court documentation confirms he participated remotely, represented by senior barristers. According to one legal commentator familiar with the proceedings, Harry had anticipated this trial would reclaim narrative authority, not only over the media, but over his own standing within the royal structure. He perceived this as his concluding moral triumph, the commentator stated. Not merely legally, but symbolically, a method to demonstrate he had been correct throughout. That anticipation was quietly demolished. Preliminary determinations indicated that numerous of Harry's assertions were time-restricted under British legislation, and that others would demand evidentiary standards considerably higher than those applied in his prior case. While no ultimate judgment was delivered at this stage, the trajectory was unmistakable. This would not be a rapid or redemptive legal resolution. Simultaneously, Meghan Markle remained conspicuously missing from all legal proceedings. Her legal team submitted no supportive motions, no sworn statements, and no amicus declarations. According to court officials, Meghan did not petition permission to attend any sessions, nor did she submit any documentation referencing Harry's assertions or circumstances. 3 days later, on January 29th, Meghan was captured attending a closed-door wellness and enterprise conference in Palo Alto, California, an event frequented by numerous international investors and foundation executives. The images circulated extensively, not because of her attendance alone, but because she was not displaying her wedding band. The conference, according to event coordinators, concentrated on cross-sector wellness enterprises, narrative leadership, and philanthropic brand cultivation. Sources familiar with the attendee roster confirmed that several Gulf-connected technology and investment entities were present. This was not a casual appearance, stated one former consultant. This was calculated positioning. Within royal circles, the optics were interpreted unambiguously. Silence is not neutral, stated one palace representative. Absence is a message. Meanwhile, speculation heightened regarding Meghan's continuing commercial relationships, particularly with a Middle Eastern financier recognized within luxury and philanthropic networks only by initials. While no formal verification exists, numerous independent sources corroborated that Meghan had participated in at least 3 private meetings with representatives of this individual's foundation in late 2024 under the banner of charitable collaboration. These were not brand sponsorships, stated one former RTUL consultant. These were capital discussions. The ramifications for Harry were immediate and destabilizing. According to a former household employee in Montecito, Harry had articulated growing apprehension throughout late 2024 and early 2025 concerning unexplained luxury deliveries to the residence, including designer accessories, high-value jewelry, and commissioned artwork, none of which were accompanied by receipts or agreements. He posed questions, the employee stated. He did not receive responses. Privately, Harry had reportedly requested financial transparency and explicit limitations regarding external benefactors. Those requests, according to sources familiar with the discussions, were rejected as regressive and control-oriented. One former associate characterized the dynamic bluntly. This was no longer a marriage, it was a partnership of narratives, and Harry was no longer the author. Within Buckingham Palace, the reaction to these developments remained strictly internal. However, representatives confirmed that multiple advisory sessions were conducted in late January addressing external reputational risk exposure, particularly concerning unauthorized narrative distribution and potential legal liability. These were not emotional briefings, stated one constitutional aide. These were compliance evaluations. Princess Anne, meanwhile, convened a private consultation with legal and custodial advisors to examine the parameters under which Harry might access Crown estate facilities for supervised child visitation, should he return to the United Kingdom under de-escalated conditions. The scope of those deliberations was limited. This was not about forgiveness, stated one advisor. It was about duty of care and risk management. Prince William's stance, however, remained fixed. According to multiple palace insiders, William considered Harry's Geneva broadcast procedurally premature and strategically compromised. He reportedly declined to participate in any private correspondence and directed staff to maintain existing non-communication protocols. William is not reacting to emotion, stated one senior aide. He is reacting to institutional risk. Princess Catherine is said to have reinforced this position, emphasizing the significance of stability, continuity, and public restraint, particularly given the Wales's expanding leadership function within the monarchy. By the conclusion of January, one determination had become unavoidable. Harry's appeal had modified public discussion, but it had not modified institutional stance. The monarchy at this juncture was not progressing toward restoration. It was progressing toward insulation. On the evening of January 22nd, just hours before his Geneva appearance, Prince Harry received an encrypted communique. Negation that would permanently alter the course of his existence. The message originated from a ProtonMail account and contained multiple PDF documents and audio recordings, allegedly sourced from a US-based boutique media agency recognized for crisis-to-culture brand cultivation. The files outlined a licensing agreement reportedly signed by Meghan Markle in October 2024, without Harry's awareness or approval. The agreement allegedly granted the firm partial rights to monetize narrative dramatizations of Meghan's royal experiences, including behind-the-scenes content derived from private correspondence, journal entries, and personal conversations within the Sussex household. Notably absent from the contract, Harry's involvement. According to one legal expert who reviewed the documents privately, the agreement did not require spousal authorization under California commercial law. However, the ethical breach, particularly given Harry's public commitment to privacy, was, in his words, profound. It wasn't illegal, the expert stated, but it was intimate, and intimacy carries obligations law does not regulate. Even more damaging were the audio recordings. The recordings, allegedly captured between 2020 and 2022 inside the Montecito estate, feature Meghan discussing private interactions with senior members of the royal family, including Prince William, Princess Catherine, and King Charles, without their knowledge or consent. One clip includes Meghan stating, "The establishment doesn't protect you, it reshapes you." Another declares Catherine's silence was the loudest rejection, its deliberate coldness. In a third, Harry's voice is faintly discernible in the background. "Perhaps we shouldn't discuss this while the children are present." The authenticity of the recordings has not been independently verified. However, multiple media outlets confirmed that digital forensics teams had been engaged to assess their origin. Harry, according to those close to him, was not shocked by the business arrangement. He was devastated by the betrayal. He had defended her publicly for years, stated a former aide. He had absorbed reputational damage for her, and now he discovered that portions of their private life may have already been packaged for sale. In the days following Geneva, Harry's legal team initiated confidential inquiries into whether the alleged agreement violated any marital asset disclosure obligations or constituted breach of fiduciary duty. No formal filings have been made public at this time. Within the palace, the reaction was immediate and uncompromising. Senior advisors convened emergency briefings to assess reputational exposure, legal risk, and data security vulnerabilities. While no official statements were issued, internal communications classified the matter as a Level 1 narrative containment event. This crossed a line, stated one senior aide, not because of emotion but because of precedent. Prince William, according to multiple insiders, regarded the revelations as confirmation of long-standing institutional concerns. He reportedly described the situation as structural, not personal, and reiterated that no private meetings or mediated engagements with Harry would be considered under current circumstances. Princess Catherine, meanwhile, is said to have described the situation as deeply distressing but not unexpected, and urged continued public composure. Princess Anne's response was more procedural than emotional. According to sources familiar with her briefings, she directed staff to review all previous non-disclosure frameworks involving the Sussexes and to reassess internal risk thresholds related to extended family engagements. "This is no longer about forgiveness," stated one royal advisor. "It is about protection." By the end of January, Harry's reality had shifted irreversibly. He was no longer merely estranged. He was now, in institutional terms, compromised. And for the Crown, compromise is not a condition that allows return. On January 23, 2026, less than 24 hours after his Geneva appearance, Prince Harry took a step that stunned both supporters and critics alike. Through legal representatives in Santa Barbara County, he formally renounced his California residency and declared his intention to relocate under personal sovereign status outside of all United States institutional frameworks. While the phrasing carried no constitutional authority, its symbolic weight was unmistakable. Harry was leaving not just Meghan, but the entire American chapter of his life. The decision triggered a series of quiet but verifiable financial and logistical actions. 3 senior domestic staff at the Montecito estate were issued early termination notices, with contractual settlements completed within 48 hours. A Range Rover previously registered under the RUL Trust was returned to Jaguar United Kingdom without replacement. Additionally, a private accountant initiated negotiations with representatives connected to Tyler Perry regarding partial repayment of security and housing costs accrued during the Sussex's extended stay at his Beverly Hills property in 2020. These were not downsizing measures, stated one financial consultant familiar with the filings. They were disengagement measures. By January 27, Harry had relocated to a modest, privately leased residence in Hampshire. No official security detail was visible. No press statement accompanied the move. Only a handwritten note left with a former staff member confirmed the emotional intent behind the decision. "I lost myself, but I found a reason to start again, even if I'm alone." Buckingham Palace maintained formal silence. However, internal briefings confirmed that Princess Anne had previously engaged legal advisors to explore frameworks that would allow Harry limited child visitation within Crown Estate properties under strictly controlled conditions. These discussions, conducted in late 2025, focused on rural locations in Gloucestershire and Western Balmoral, away from public visibility and media infrastructure. Anne was prepared to facilitate access, stated one courtier, but not rehabilitation. When pressed by reporters on January 24 at a Commonwealth Armed Services roundtable in Edinburgh, Princess Anne delivered what many now regard as the monarchy's definitive position. "The monarchy is not a boarding house," she stated. "You do not return between storms. When one chooses to exit, one accepts the consequences. We can offer privacy but not rehabilitation." The statement was neither emotional nor punitive, it was procedural. Within palace corridors, the line was interpreted as final. "This was not a personal rebuke," stated one constitutional aide. "It was an institutional boundary." Prince William's position remained firm. According to senior advisors, he regarded Harry's departure from the United States as necessary but insufficient. William reportedly emphasized that physical relocation did not equate to reputational restoration, nor did it mitigate the institutional risks associated with recent disclosures. "He sees this as containment, not reconciliation," stated one aide. Princess Catherine, meanwhile, reinforced the importance of stability and forward continuity, particularly as the Wales's leadership role expands. She reportedly described Harry's situation as profoundly sad, but insisted that the monarchy could not afford further narrative volatility. By the end of January, Harry's status had shifted once again. He was no longer an exile in America. He was now a resident in Britain, but not a member of the institution that once defined him. And that distinction within royal constitutional structures is absolute. As Prince Harry resettled in Hampshire, attention shifted from public statements to the most consequential dimension of the crisis. His children, Archie, now 6, and Lilibet, 3, remain under Meghan Markle's primary physical custody in California. According to Santa Barbara County Court filings, Harry currently holds limited joint legal custody with restricted physical access, including weekly supervised virtual contact and quarterly in-person visits, subject to mutual consent and neutral location approval. These arrangements stem from mediation proceedings initiated under California Family Law Code Section 3170, following Harry's unilateral divorce filing in August 2025. The filing, briefly public under case number 2025 Dr. 3381, was sealed within 72 hours after Harry withdrew the motion, reportedly after receiving a photograph of Lilibet hospitalized during a minor respiratory illness. "It changed everything," stated one source close to the mediation. "He couldn't go through with a legal war while his daughter was vulnerable." Between September and November 2025, Harry and Meghan participated in court-mandated reconciliation mediation overseen by a judge from San Luis Obispo County. No formal settlement was reached. However, Harry agreed to maintain joint legal custody in exchange for preserving daily virtual contact with the children and avoiding a prolonged public trial. During mediation, Harry proposed a bicontinental parenting framework, primary education in the United Kingdom with structured holidays in the United States. Meghan rejected the proposal outright, reportedly describing Britain as a trauma site and labeling the proposal a regression into imperial frameworks. She told mediators that the children deserve freedom from what she called legacy burdening, stated a source familiar with the sessions. By December, Harry had accepted a revised arrangement that prohibited international relocation of the children without Meghan's written consent. Since then, no such consent has been granted. Following Harry's Geneva appearance and subsequent return to Britain, Princess Anne's office initiated discreet legal inquiries into whether Crown Estate properties could be used as neutral visitation sites under strict privacy protocols. These discussions focused on rural Gloucestershire and Balmoral's Western Lodge, emphasizing media exclusion, limited staff access, and non-public scheduling. However, Anne made it explicitly clear that such assistance would not constitute reintegration into royal life. "Our help ends where the institution begins," she reportedly told advisors. "We protect the family name, not individual regret." The distinction was critical. Harry was not being offered restoration. He was being offered access, conditional, limited, and silent. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle re-emerged publicly with strategic precision. On January 19, 2026, she attended the Women Who Lead the World Summit in Abu Dhabi, an invitation-only forum for transnational philanthropists and venture capital leaders. Wearing a custom black abaya and a Cartier brooch reportedly gifted by a Gulf financier, she delivered a keynote address titled The Independent Woman, reclaiming narrative without permission. According to attendees, the speech was met with standing applause. However, one passage drew particular attention. "When you're born into silence, you think love means loyalty, but sometimes love means leaving and becoming your own sovereign." Within 48 hours, the quote circulated widely across social media platforms, interpreted by commentators as both a personal farewell and a strategic repositioning. On January 24th, the same day Princess Anne reaffirmed the monarchy's boundary, Meghan launched a new global platform titled ARCA Legacy, described as an initiative supporting resilience, equity, and empowered storytelling. The launch video, distributed via Instagram and syndication partnerships, featured Meghan walking barefoot through a rose garden in white, declaring, "This is not reinvention, it's restoration." Notably absent from the video, any mention of Harry, the monarchy, or the Sussex title. In her updated professional biography, she listed only 4 descriptors: founder, mother, builder, voice. Behind the scenes, however, scrutiny intensified around Meghan's alleged benefactor, an unnamed Gulf-based financier reportedly connected to luxury brand sponsorships and international media ventures. While no formal allegations have been substantiated, multiple insiders confirmed his presence at the Abu Dhabi summit and at private dinners involving French executives linked to Maison, a Paris-based fashion consortium rumored to be launching a royalty-inspired fragrance line. "These are not casual relationships," stated one branding consultant familiar with the network. "They are capital strategies." For Harry, the juxtaposition was devastating. While Meghan expanded her global platform, he faced legal limitations, geographic separation from his children, and an institutional boundary that now appeared immovable. According to one friend from his military service, Harry recently declined a scheduled visit with his children in Los Angeles, stating, "I won't see them in front of their lenses. Not again." The decision reflected the paradox defining his current existence. Stay close and risk permanent entanglement in a media ecosystem he no longer trusts. Leave and risk becoming a distant memory in his children's lives. In private correspondence, Harry has reportedly expressed concern that continued litigation or public exposure would further destabilize his children's emotional environment. "He told me he feels like every move he makes either costs him dignity or access," stated one confidant, "and he doesn't know which loss he can survive." Within the palace, the situation is viewed not as a family dispute, but as a governance issue. Senior constitutional advisors have classified Harry's status as non-operational, meaning he will not be reinstated to honorary military roles, will not appear in the royal yearbook, and will not participate in institutional ceremonies. His coat of arms remains frozen as of 2020. "This is not punishment," stated one aide, "this is precedent." The monarchy, now increasingly oriented toward continuity under Prince William and Princess Catherine, has shifted decisively toward institutional preservation over reconciliation. And for Prince Harry, the most painful truth has become inescapable. He is no longer negotiating with family, he is negotiating with history. The palace did not respond publicly to Harry's latest legal defeat. There were no statements, no briefings, no carefully worded expressions of regret. And that silence, more than any royal press release, carried meaning. Inside institutional circles, the message was clear. The monarchy was no longer managing Harry's outcomes. It was no longer insulating him from consequences. The era of quiet intervention, private settlements, and reputation buffering was over. What replaced it was something far more final. According to multiple sources familiar with internal correspondence, Prince William made his position known within hours of the ruling, not through media channels, not through intermediaries, but directly through formal legal counsel to Harry's representatives. The message was short. There would be no financial assistance, no legal coverage, no mediation, no appeals support, no institutional backing of any kind. Harry was, in effect, fully independent. That status change from protected royal to private litigant was not merely symbolic. It carried real-world implications. Without palace indemnification, Harry now faced the full weight of adverse cost orders, potential enforcement actions, and long-term reputational damage that could impact future commercial contracts, speaking engagements, and media partnerships. And that reality began to surface almost immediately. Within days, reports emerged that at least one major US-based agency had placed Harry's representation under internal review. While no formal termination was announced, insiders acknowledged that his legal instability, public credibility erosion, and ongoing conflict profile had become commercially unfavorable. At the same time, private briefings suggested that at least one streaming partner had paused development discussions, pending resolution of outstanding reputational and financial exposure. In simpler terms, Harry was becoming unbankable. What made this collapse particularly severe was not the loss of public sympathy, that had been declining for years, but the loss of institutional trust. Courts, corporate partners, and financial backers increasingly viewed Harry not as a victim of systemic injustice, but as a litigant who repeatedly misrepresented timelines, motives, and institutional relationships. That shift altered the entire frame of his public narrative. No longer was he seen as a prince fighting an unfair press system. He was now perceived as a private citizen leveraging royal status without royal accountability. And courts were no longer accommodating that contradiction. Meanwhile, within royal circles, the mood was not celebratory, it was resigned. According to palace-adjacent sources, King Charles expressed personal sorrow over the situation, but reaffirmed his position that institutional boundaries could no longer be compromised for personal outcomes. The monarchy cannot function if private grievances dictate public authority, he reportedly stated. Princess Anne was said to be more blunt. This was inevitable, one source quoted her as saying, and it is necessary. But it was Princess Catherine whose response reportedly carried the most emotional weight. Privately, she is said to have expressed sadness, not only for Harry's current position, but for the person he had become, someone increasingly isolated, increasingly adversarial, and increasingly unable to distinguish between personal grievance and institutional betrayal. She reportedly remarked, "He does not see that he is burning the bridge while standing on it." Prince William, for his part, maintained a position of firm finality. According to those close to him, William viewed the legal defeat not as a punishment, but as a boundary, a natural consequence of repeated choices. His focus was not on Harry's loss, but on the stability of the crown, the protection of his children's future, and the preservation of institutional credibility. "There are lines," a senior aide summarized, "and those lines exist for a reason." The emotional impact of this separation became most evident in the days following the ruling. Harry reportedly attempted to initiate private contact, not through lawyers, not through public statements, but through personal intermediaries, friends, family connections, and mutual acquaintances. Those attempts, according to sources, were not successful. No meetings were scheduled, no conversations were facilitated, no responses were issued. Not out of cruelty, but out of finality. The monarchy had not expelled Harry, but it had stopped pursuing him. And that distinction mattered. For years, Harry's public narrative relied on the idea that he had been pushed out, silenced, suppressed, or exiled. But now the institutional posture suggested something different. He had not been pushed away, he had walked away. And now the door had quietly closed behind him. This did not mean that reconciliation was impossible. But it did mean that reconciliation, if it were ever to occur, would no longer be mediated by legal threats, public accusations, or commercial leverage. It would require something far more difficult. Accountability, responsibility, and the abandonment of the victim framework that had defined Harry's public identity for more than a decade. As one senior legal observer put it, courts have ruled, institutions have moved on, the narrative has shifted. The question now is not whether Harry was wronged, but whether he is willing to stop wronging others in response. For the monarchy, this chapter is closing, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with silence. And silence in this context is not indifference, it is distance. And distance, for the first time, is not imposed on Harry. It is chosen.